Hello, hello! Welcome to another LRH Wellness Book Club video. Today we're talking about The Sugar Jar by Yasmine Cheyenne, and I am so excited to finally get this video to you. I had a test last week, so that's why we're a little behind. So I have my laptop here with all my little notes that I'm going to talk about, so when you see me looking to the side, that's why, not because I'm being rude, or it's because the dogs are being bad. You know what this is. So, Yasmine Cheyenne's book, The Sugar Jar. Goose! So, Yasmine Cheyenne's The Sugar Jar, I really like the book. So, I will say, I feel like I didn't find any of the information or like quotes or kind of like theory, like revolutionary. But I think I listened to it in a time that I really needed to hear it, and it was really clear. That's what I liked. It was really clear. And what her point was very easy to grasp. So I really like that. So her whole thing is like, your energy, your vessel is like a sugar jar. And you can take out, like everything you do takes out of that sugar jar. And you decide how and where you want to put your sugar. You also decide when you refill it, what you do when it's all clumped up, how you taint it. And just pretty much like you imagine a sugar jar. Her whole thing is like that we are all sugar jars and we expend our sugar. And everything we do either expends it or refills our jar. And sometimes we want to expend our sugar and other times we don't. And so she talks about like just giving your sugar away, like taking your energy and just expending it in a lot of different ways that aren't what you want to spend it on. And kind of like three big things she talks about. One, just kind of how we view ourselves in community and the role we think we have to play versus the role we need to play, the role we should play. I also really liked what she talked about when it came to boundaries. And I also really appreciated when she talked about like creating the life that you want to live and living it as such. To me, I think it's easy to live a life of shoulds and what we should do and the expectations of others. And it is a lot harder to live the life that we actually want. And so she talks a lot about making sure that we're doing the things that we want to do, that we're taking our sugar and putting it in a way that we want to do. And something she talked about that was such a good example was like going to the birthday party of a friend. And she talks about how the birthday party might be 8 till 12 in the morning or something like really late. And she talks about how like she agreed to go to the birthday party because the friend said, oh, it means so much to me that you can come, and now we think we have to go. And even though it's a social event, it's not rejuvenating in the way we need. And I get that so much. I think like sometimes I find that I know being social, what are you doing? I know being social for me is really rejuvenating, but within limits. And I think that I say yes to a lot of things because I know like I genuinely do like social endeavors, but sometimes I say yes when I really don't want to, when I don't have the energy and it's not going to fill me up in the ways I need. So I really appreciated her talking about how like we can be intentional, we can be social without doing the shoulds. So she gives the example like saying like, you probably think you should go to the birthday party, but you don't have to. And if the friend feels upset about it, that's okay. But what you can do is find a meaningful way to hang out with that same friend on another day in a way that works best for you. And so I really liked that. And that to me like really embodied this thing where she talked about like, you want to have a life as good as it looks, that feels as good as it looks. And I think we think that if we do all the things right to have what we should have or what a good life looks like, that it will automatically feel that way. And that is just so untrue. Even when we have a good life and it looks good and it looks like we have everything we want, and whether that be you have a beach house in Miami to like you just want to go hike in the woods, like whatever it looks like that's a good life to you, it should also feel good. And it really, reading this book really reminded me about like how to align what my life looks like with what I want to feel and what I want to do, what I feel like my time's worth spending on. And so another big point she talks about is like, when you have community, like, you can't do everything. And I think as Black women, like, we really take that on, that superwoman thing. And it's hard because I so much feel obligation to things that I really don't have an obligation to do, and nobody asked me to do, but for whatever reason, like, I've decided that it is my responsibility. And listening to this book, so I listened to it and I read it, I went back and forth. When I was listening to this section, you know, it really like a light bulb clicked. Like, wow, I am doing so much more than I have to do just because I think other people have the expectation of me. I really appreciated that, and I think like hearing that was at the right point I needed it to be. And additionally, she talks about like starting and stopping and restarting your wellness and health journey and healing journey wherever you are. And I think that was really nice because I think most people think of wellness, health, and all of that as a linear process, and it's not. And that reminder to me was really salient because there are times when you need a reset where like you think you're on the right track, you think you're doing everything right, but it's really not, and you feel like you're not healing in the ways that you would like to heal. To me, that was like really important to talk about and to see. And so with that, she, you know, really moving into like this boundaries idea. And I talk to one of my really good friends about this often. Like, a boundary is not a boundary unless you maintain it. Like, boundaries are something that we have, and we have, like, when that boundary's crossed, we have a response. We can't expect other people to maintain a boundary that we don't even maintain. And so we often talk about, like, other people crossing your boundaries and repeatedly, like, infiltrating your space in the ways that you don't like. And I think that listening to her talk about it is like, if it's my boundary, I have to enforce that it's going to be maintained. Because if people think they can cross your boundaries constantly and you don't do anything to reestablish that boundary, they will. And I thought that that was really powerful. And she uses it in the jar, like, as an analogy. Like, you know, if you have a boundary, that's the top of your sugar jar. But you have to put the top on the sugar jar so that it's not just taken out of. Now, if you leave the top off and tell people, oh, act like the top's on, act like I have this boundary, this is my boundary, even though there's nothing to enforce it, they're just going to keep taking if you don't stop them or put that lid back on. And so when she talked about boundaries, I thought it was just like really important to think about how I'm setting boundaries and how do I set these boundaries in a way in which it leads to a life of ease. Because I think this beautiful thing is that I truly believe like life should have a level of ease to it. Life should be joyful, it should be fun, it's an adventure. And like adventures sometimes are hard, don't get me wrong, but there should be this level of ease and lightness that comes with this adventure of life. And she really emphasized taking the life of ease and making it yours. And so when she talked about boundaries, she really emphasized this, and I really appreciated that. Something she talked about, though, was imposter syndrome. And I've decided to reject the idea of imposter syndrome. So this is somewhere I deviated, because she talks about imposter syndrome and how it can be so, you know, incredibly consuming. And don't get me wrong, I understand why that language, imposter syndrome, exists as a concept. But I want to say that most places, it's not that it's imposter syndrome, it's the place isn't meant for me. And so even though, so like I'll take medical school. So everybody talks about imposter syndrome, imposter syndrome, imposter syndrome. Like you feel like you shouldn't be here, da 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 da. And last year when I had to repeat my first year of medical school, everybody really used that language to describe what I was going through, but I wouldn't use that language. I felt like I deserved to be where I was. I worked hard. I have big visions. I try my very best, and I know I'm smart. I know I can do it. But what it wasn't I didn't feel like I deserved to be there. It's that this space wasn't designed for me. As a black person in South Carolina, as a black woman in South Carolina, medical school is not designed with me in mind. And it's not, especially not designed for me, being that I'm not a hard STEM major. I don't come from a hard STEM background. And that to me was so infuriating last year, because it's like, I actually don't feel like an imposter. I think I deserve to be here a lot more than some other people actually, who probably feel like they deserve to be here. But instead I had this perspective of like, this school isn't built to work for me. I have to figure out how to manipulate the school for my best interest, because I'm not going to be manipulated by the school, if that makes sense. And so she talks about imposter syndrome, specifically talking about this workshop, this business workshop she went to on the Upper East Side in Manhattan, which like is the super bougie rich part of Manhattan. And to me it was like, and like in this she talks about like how all these narratives she has in her head, she's sure nobody really was thinking about. And that to me, like I literally wrote in my notes, like, you are not as important as you think you are. And that sounds horrible, but it's also true. Like, you should be your most important thing, but other people aren't worried about you, ever. There's very few people who look at you and are worried about what you're doing, and the people who do that are either the people very close to you, or they're weirdos. They're people that you don't want to associate with, because their chances are they're using you, they're paying attention to you like that to tear you down. Go, stop. No, sir. They're tearing you down or looking to find ways to tear you down. So when she was talking about imposter syndrome and just like feeling it and just, you know, having these self-narratives that she felt nobody else really probably had, but that's what she was telling herself, I like completely agree. I have these false narratives that I tell myself and all that, but I also think like we need to stop thinking of imposter syndrome as I don't belong, instead of like, this space wasn't designed for me. And once we can open ourselves to like that purview of healing, like the spaces we're in are not designed for us, then I think it enables us to really like apply a approach to healing that is for us and not just done because it's the way it should happen. 1 second. So with imposter syndrome, she also talks a lot about just like being at a different stage than other people. And she talks about imposter syndrome in the sense of, she talks about like when you're comparing yourself to others, like just because you're at a different stage than other people doesn't mean you're failing. That doesn't mean, it means you're at a different stage. And like hearing that to me was really reassuring, because because again, we are told that our journeys are supposed to be so linear, and they're not. And anytime we deviate from that linear journey, it is so easy to think that we're wrong, that we're doing something that's not right, that we're failing. And so I really appreciated hearing that and thinking about the ways in which like failure, honestly, like it's making me think of like failure, maybe failure like doesn't actually really exist. Or maybe failure is the wrong way to look at unsuccessful attempts. I don't know. I'm still like kind of working through my thoughts of that. But it really did resonate with me when she talked about like being at your own stage, your own step, your own level. Like that's not failure. That's just your own growth pace, which is okay to be slower than others. And the last thing I really wanted to talk about was self-forgiveness. So she talks about having self-forgiveness, having grace, all of that. And it was interesting listening to her talk about it, because I realized like I don't know what self-forgiveness means. I don't know what it means for me to really forgive myself for errors or things I mess up or don't do right or that I'm doing that I'm not supposed to be doing. You know, like all these negative narratives. I don't know how to forgive myself for having them. I'm working on now like acknowledging the narratives and stopping them in their tracks. But then I'm trying to figure out how to stop and see a place of forgiveness within it. And that's my current, I feel like, growth step that I'm looking for in my healing journey. Just learning how to forgive myself and really mean it and really maintain that forgiveness and grace. there was a lot in this book. If you're reading it, if you're checking it out, I definitely suggest you head to Well Together to talk about it more. Comment below what you think, and have a great week. And oh, our next book, I'm so excited to tell you, is, let me get it. So our next book is You Are Your Best Thing, and this is You Are Your Best Thing, Vulnerability, Shame, Resilience, and the Black Experience, an anthology. And this is edited by Tarana Burke, the founder of the Me Too movement, and Brene Brown. She's an expert on shame and vulnerability. I'm really excited about this book. I've actually read it before. It's a series of essays by different authors. So you can see here are all the contributors, like Black authors. And shame is so complicated. And when I read this book the first time, I was like, wow, shame is so complicated. I hold shame for so many things that I didn't even realize. And so I know already, I've read a couple of the essays so far, like, so much is gonna come up again. And so I'm really excited to see what you think, to have a discussion on shame and how we forgo our shame. Thanks again, guys. As always, like, subscribe, comment, share. Subscribe again. Share it with your grandma. Share it with your homies. Share it everywhere. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.